We'll call the meeting to order. This is the Geneva Area City Board of Education, January 20th regular meeting. Roll call, Mr. Lillie?
Mr. Arndt?
Present.
Mr. Dana?
Present.
Ms. Fisher?
Present.
Mrs. Metzler?
Here.
And Mrs. Ortiz?
Here.
Are we in compliance?
Yes, we are.
Okay, we will now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Correspondence?
I have no correspondence for this evening.
Okay, agenda modification.
We do have one agenda modification. There's an addition to number 9, and that ends the agenda modifications for this evening.
Okay. At this time, we'll have the hearing of the public. If there has anyone that would like to make comment at this time, please start by giving your name and address. And just as a reminder, there will be another hearing of the public at the end of the meeting. Okay, moving on. Approval of the minutes.
So moved.
I'll second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
Mr. Dana?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
And Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes.
Okay, so passed. Do we have a motion to accept the treasurer's financial report?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, Mr. Lillie?
Mr. Dana?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes.
And Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
Next item is approval of invoices.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes.
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
And Mr. Dana?
Yes.
Okay, informational items.
You will see another donation from the Augustinskis, former GHS graduates, to the Geneva Schools Food Service Program for distribution with the bag lunches. This time it's 88 cases of the Utz snowballs, which is the cheese ball, and then a $50 anonymous donation for pay to participate fee at the high school.
Okay. Legislative report, Mrs. Metzler?
Yes, tonight it's a little lengthy, and I want to let you know that each month I forward you the report the next day. So there will be a little bit more information than what I will be giving orally today on the report that you receive tomorrow. So since we last met, Governor DeWine signed the following bills into law. House Bill 123, which is instruction in suicide awareness and prevention and violence prevention. Senate Bill 310, which discusses capital appropriations, the creation of the Holocaust and Genocide Memorial and Education Commission, provides $3 million in lottery funds to pay for the school funding studies, and temporarily moves the start date for the Ed Choice Scholarship Program voucher application window to March 2nd of 2021. He also signed into law House Bill 231. That happened in early January, which requires the ODE to publicize a list of entities that provide free and reduced epinephrine auto-injectors. House Bill 409 provides continued flexibility and relief during COVID-19, including exempting the school districts from retaining a student under the third grade reading guarantee for the 2021 school year. House Bill 436 deals with dyslexia screenings. House Bill 442 deals with licensing and residency requirements for teachers. House Bill 210 is a bill that requires preschool programs and other entities licensed by the ODE to screen and test prospective employees for tuberculosis. House Bill 450 is regarding fiscal officer transition requirements. Senate Bill 259, the bill that requires the installation of water bottle filling stations and drinking fountains in new school buildings that are constructed with the assistance of the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission. Senate Bill 68, regarding curriculum for high school students regarding proper interaction with peace officers. And Senate Bill 331 sunsets the academic standards review committees in English, math, social studies, and science. So the governor was very busy since our last meeting, signing these into law. But the following bills were in the final stages of the legislative process and as of yet have not been signed into law. House Bill 38, which provides a reduced property valuation for the tax years of 2020, 21, and 22 for businesses and eligible individuals as a result of the pandemic. House Bill 75 regarding property tax complaints. House Bill 425 regarding peace officer training for employees. Senate Bill 95 regarding property tax exemption reporting. And Senate Bill 212 regarding tax exemptions for newly constructed homes. Despite the fury of activity as the legislative session neared its end, House Bill 305, which we've discussed many times and did last month as well, the much discussed school funding proposal jointly sponsored by Cupp-Patterson failed to gain approval in the Senate before the end of the Assembly. The 134th General Assembly began on Monday, January 4th, 2021. The Ohio House of Representatives will again be led by Speaker Robert R. Cupp and the Minority Leader Emilia Strong Sykes, and the Ohio Senate elected Matt Huffman as the Senate President and Senator Kenny Yuko as the Minority Leader. On the topic of school funding, Huffman made the following remarks, quote, "I think the focus needs to return to teachers, and that's, I think, one of the things that needs to be part of however it is that we fund the schools," end quote. One action that did occur during lame duck regarding 305 was the inclusion of the $3 million to pay for the school funding studies that were part of the bill. That funding was included in Senate Bill 310 that I just mentioned earlier. Senator Matt Dolan expressed hope for getting those studies done by the end of March. Additionally, Huffman has said that he looks forward to working with Cupp on the fair school funding plan, as well as other important pieces of legislation in the new General Assembly. On December 27th, former President Trump signed House Resolution 133. That's another stimulus bill to provide supplemental emergency funding, including the following K-12 education funding and policies. There's $54 billion for the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, received through formula grants to states, at least 90% of which must support local educational agencies' coronavirus response activities. These funds will be distributed to states using the Every Student Succeeds Act Title 1A formula. And $4.05 billion to the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, which allows governors in each state to allocate at their discretion for emergency support grants to local educational agencies. Of those funds, $2.75 billion are to be used for private K-12 schools. And it also extends the spending deadline for the Coronavirus Relief Fund to December 31st of 21. It was originally had a deadline of December 30th of 2020. The allocations for the states have not yet been announced, but the distribution methodology appears to be largely the same as the CARES Act, under which Ohio received roughly 3.6% of the nation's share of the ESSER. That would mean Ohio could receive roughly $1.74 billion in new ESSER funds. School districts can expend the ESSER funds through September 30th of 2022, although I did see a publication that said 2023, but on the same permissible uses as under the CARES Act. The new law also expands the list of allowable uses in the following areas: addressing learning loss among students by administering tests to assess academic progress, implementing evidence-based activities to meet student needs, providing information and assistance to parents and families on how to effectively support students, including in a distant learning environment, or tracking student attendance and improving student engagement in distance education. It can also be used for school facility repairs and improvements that reduce the risk of the virus transmission, and for inspection, testing, maintenance, repair, replacement, and upgrade projects to improve the indoor air quality in school facilities. Another feature of the bill includes appropriating $7 billion to expand the broadband access for students, families, and unemployed individuals, including a new $3.2 billion emergency broadband benefit that provides a monthly $50 broadband payment for low-income families and appropriating $300 million for rural broadband. On the same topic, Lieutenant Governor John Husted announced in early January that the deadline to spend funds from the Broadband Ohio Connectivity Grant has been extended to December 31st of 2021. The grant was funded using the CRF from the CARES Act. So since Congress extended the spending deadline for CRF, the grant was able to be extended as well. And while still president-elect, President Joe Biden announced the American Rescue Plan, a $1.9 trillion federal COVID-19 emergency plan that includes $130 billion for K-12 schools. In the publication, it said that these funds can be used to reduce class sizes and modify spaces so students and teachers can socially distance, improve ventilation, hire more janitors and implement mitigation measures, provide personal protective equipment, ensure every school has access to a nurse, increase transportation capacity to facilitate social distancing on the bus, hire counselors to support students as they transition back to the classroom, provide summer school or other support for students that will help make up lost learning time this year, and cover other costs needed to support safely reopening and support students. The districts must ensure that the funds are used to not only reopen the schools, but also to meet the students' academic, mental health, and social and emotional needs in response to COVID-19. And we can expect to hear more details in the upcoming months on this. And finally, the first bill that was introduced in this session is Senate Bill 1, introduced on January 14th, relating to teaching financial literacy in high school. And that concludes the legislative report for this month.
Amber, can I ask you a question here? And I'm sorry, I missed the numbers here with respect to the Every Student Succeeds fund here. How much money was appropriated and how much was that for public schools and private schools?
So of the House Resolution 133, the only part that broke out public versus private was the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund. And in that, it was a total of $4.05 billion, with $2.75 billion going to private schools.
Okay. So Eric, is there any, do we still have some outstanding need here with some of our parents that have a hard time connecting to broadband? It sounds like there's additional funds for that, as well as to increase indoor air quality. Are these things that we could perhaps seek to get some of those funds to utilize here for Geneva?
We've done quite a bit with the air quality, but obviously there's always some other things that we could look at. In regards to the public Wi-Fi, we do have all of those Wi-Fi spots and locations set up now. We did purchase 50 hotspots, and currently right now we're using about 30 of those from the request from families. So we do have about 30 in use. And part of the Student Success and Wellness Plan, I did add in some funds to continue providing that service to students and families that needed that connectivity within our district. But we can definitely look if there's other options that we may have. You know, one of the comments that we received back, some of the areas that have difficulty with the internet also have difficulty with cell service. So although they're able to access the internet, they're able to pick up lessons that the teachers are providing. If there's anything that demands very high levels of connectivity, such as videos, that they do have problems with. So we may have to look at maybe some other options. So that might be something we want to investigate.
And while we're at it, we can also look to increase the quality of your microphone that you're using too. So that's a joke.
Okay, anything else? For the ATEC report, the organizational meeting was held on January 14th. There will be an orientation session for all of the ATEC board members that want to attend, and that will kind of give an overview of the various programs that are offered and the status of them as far as the attendance and the signups that they've got. The videos were made of the various programs that could be distributed to schools or put online to aid in this time when people can't get together like they used to have in-house open houses. So those are in the final edit at this time. For the next session, the acceptance letters are starting to go out tomorrow and Friday. And the ATEC is working with the Ashtabula County Health Department as being a vaccine site that's tentatively scheduled for February 13th, but they're still working on details, and of course it will all depend on vaccine being here. So that's the end of the ATEC report. Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. I want to begin tonight because each January we join the Ohio School Boards Association to celebrate and recognize our local boards of education. This year's theme is Building the Future of Public Education. As citizens who serve children and represent their communities, individual school board members face complex and demanding challenges. Their love of learning and concern and caring for students, staff, and the communities drive board members' desire to lead so students can achieve. Our school board is one of more than 700 such school boards across the state of Ohio. These boards enable us to have local control of our public schools. This year, and especially the last 10 months, have brought many challenges. We thank you, our school board, for your leadership and dedication to our district. It's my pleasure to recognize our board members and thank them for their years of service. Mr. Richard Arndt, with 5.5 years of service. Mr. Richard, 7 years of service, and he is joining us tonight via Zoom, so virtually I am handing you this certificate. Ms. Sarah Fisher, with 5 years of service. Mrs. Amber Metzler, with 1 year of service. Again, she is joining us tonight via Zoom, so congratulations. And Mrs. Jamie Ortiz, with 3 years of service. Again, congratulations to all of our board members, and we thank you on behalf of the Geneva schools, teachers, staff, community, and students. We thank you from the bottom of our heart for all of your hard work and effort, especially during these very challenging times.
Thank you.
So we started with our recognition of our school board members, which obviously is one of our Geneva Pride positives. We'll continue with our Geneva Pride positives for this evening. At Ostenburg, Cork, and Geneva Platt Spencer, all Geneva Elementary students are now one-to-one with Chromebooks. Mr. Brigard and our technology representatives worked on unpacking and setting up the Chromebooks for student use. Thank you to the Geneva Board of Education for approving the purchase of additional Chromebooks. Also at Ostenburg, Cork, and Geneva Platt Spencer, inside the buildings have been painted and cleaned thoroughly with some additional time during the remote schedule. Thank you to the custodians and housekeepers for all of your hard work. Geneva Elementary Schools received funds through the K-12 Prevention Grant through Ashtabula County. This was provided by the Ohio Department of Mental Health. The schools will be able to use the $18,288.86 to provide various resources for PBIS and PACS. Shannon's Mini Mart supported 20 Geneva families during the holidays with support from the community and Geneva staff members. Thank you to all that donated and Mr. Shannon for always finding ways to help our community. And also for the elementary schools, Harpersfield United Methodist Church and the Harpersfield Ruritans found ways to help school families during the holidays. Thank you to all the community members that helped make this difficult time a little more manageable. At Geneva Middle School school counselor, Mrs. George, hosted a virtual mental health month during the month of December. Students participated remotely in a wide range of activities, which included reaching out to peers, sending impactful messages to teachers, performing community service, and studying various forms of self-soothing and coping strategies. Thank you, Mrs. George, for all the students and all the students who participated. And also at Geneva Middle School, winter sports seasons are underway at Geneva Middle School after a short delay. Geneva Middle School held their first home games this past week with great success. We owe a great deal of gratitude to our custodial staff for preparing our facilities and to the spectators for following all the health and safety procedures. Go Eagles. And at Geneva High School, the Adobe graphic design class has taken a positive turn during stressful times. The students have briefly veered away from the book to create unique and special projects for the school and their peers. Rather than do random projects from the book, they have been creating large graphic displays, posters, student highlights, etc., that we will see used and hanging throughout the school and on social media. The class will also be giving something to each student. They will not only get to work with modern graphic design ideas, but using them in school and online will give them a chance to showcase their work. The students' interest in these types of projects has grown immensely by not only showing them a growing market for this type of work, but by also being able to create something that can be implemented in their own school district and possibly community. And finally, at Geneva High School, a virtual whodunit was completely cast, rehearsed, performed, and presented through the Zoom format. Attendees who purchased tickets were able to scan tickets to see the performances, and the show had a different ending for each night. Kudos to the cast and crew for continuing to make theater happen during this crazy year. Auditions for the small show, Steel Magnolias, are slated for next week. So congratulations to all of those students, staff, teachers for, again, making a difference and showing your pride in Geneva schools.
Okay. I recommend that the board approve the following resolution. A resolution granting the superintendent authority to prohibit retention of certain students under the third grade reading guarantee in accordance with House Bill 409. Do I hear a
moved.
motion?
So moved.
Second? I'll second. Discussion?
This just goes along with the new law. It's just a requirement that we have to put in place.
Yes, it does go along with House Bill 409 and included the extension of the prohibition that they had last year for the third grade reading guarantee. Again, there is circumstances that consist of if the building principal and the student's reading teacher believe that the student is reading below grade level and are not prepared for fourth grade, they could be retained, but they cannot on the testing cycle.
I will just note, since I'm here via Zoom, I will give the president the sign my name on this resolution, assuming that it's approved, as long as she does her best Spencerian script.
Thanks. Any other discussion?
If I understand it right, Eric, it gives you and the teacher final authority, so they won't hold the child to the testing. It's based on what you and the principal and the teacher think. Okay.
Okay, roll call?
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz,
Yes.
Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
and Ms. Fisher.
Yes. I recommend that the board suspend performance evaluations for teachers and counselors for the 2020-2021 school year if the evaluation has not already been completed for the current year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Ortiz,
Yes.
Mr. Arndt,
No.
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
and Mrs. Metzler.
Yes.
I recommend that the board approve the revision of the Student Wellness and Success Funds Plan. The plan is in collaboration with the Ashtabula County Educational Service Center.
So moved.
I'll second.
Discussion?
Eric, can you tell us a little bit more about this, since we just received this here earlier today?
Yes, the first plan that was approved by the board is very similar. There were a few additions. First of all, this is a revision. We did receive our second payment for the Student Wellness and Success Funds, and you'll see that there was a second budget page that was attached. Most of the changes in the document were extending the years that we will be offering some of these services. Most we had only approved for a 3-year period, 2019 through 2022. I've added the years 2022-23 and 2023-24. We did have 2 additions as part of this revision. The first being that we worked out an agreement, and I attached their agreement with community counseling. In the past, community counseling only serviced students that received Medicaid or Medicare, had other ways that they could pay for those services, although they were in our schools. This is always concerning because we have a number of students that need counseling, need intensive services, but we're not able to obtain those. What I added to the plan is that there would be a monthly cost so that we would be able to get the initial assessment services through community counseling for any student within the district, regardless of if they were a current client or if they could pay. Once that initial assessment was done, students' families could receive additional services based on the recommendation of the counselors. As part of their agreement, they put a level of service and what different payments there are for those services. We would allot a certain number of dollars that would be allowed to be spent for providing these services to our students. So that's the major change, and that is on page 7. And again, the agreement that is with community counseling that would start February 1st, if this is approved, is added to this document. We've set aside $50,000, and that would include the annual payment for the initial services, and then any services that would have to be completed for a student or family after that. They do have a new office that they will be opening in Geneva that's right on Route 20 between Assumption Church and Chestnut Street. When they open that office, not only could they see students within our school district at one of our buildings, but they also would have, students or families would have access to that office location when that becomes available. I'm not sure that they've had their grand opening, as some delays have occurred during the pandemic. The other additional item that we added new to the revision, and I talked about this briefly before, is on page number 8. This is a family technology engagement. We did purchase Wi-Fi spots and also hotspots for many of our families that cannot interact with the district through technology. As we've mentioned at previous board meetings, we are going to look very closely at what we can offer to our students in the coming years via remote education or online education, as I believe that with the current state that we are in and the instruction that we are offering, if we don't offer some opportunities to our students, we may end up losing some of those students to other charter schools or other online schools. So we are looking very diligently at what we can do as a district to try to keep students here in Geneva schools. With the hotspots that we purchased, as I mentioned earlier, we are using about 30 of those currently. We have an additional 20 that we can use, and we may need to look at some other options as we move forward, and that might be one of those grant opportunities through the state. But one of the needs was to continue to be able to pay for these hotspots as we move forward. So I did add this to our Student Success and Wellness Fund and made sure that we had a funding source to continue to be able to pay for those hotspots, again, to continue to engage our families and our students. The last 2 pages, pages 9 and 10, page 9 is very similar to the budget that was on the original document. It has the initiatives that we currently have in place, which include our truant officer, our homeschool coordinator, that we have a purchase service through the ESC, our SRO that's part of our district now in a shared service with the City of Geneva, with a potential latchkey program that we're looking at that we had on the budget last year, and this would be at our elementary buildings, a summer reading program that would begin this summer and be available to students this summer, our school community liaison, which was new to us this year, and we only were able to secure one person, but that person right now is working for all of the buildings and trying to connect with families that may not, that either students are having trouble in school, having attendance issues, maybe are having a difficult time connecting with the school. So kind of a person to try to find some way to remedy the issues that the student or family may be having and come to some kind of resolution as kind of that go-between between the school and the family. And then also I had in the information for our behavior intervention program or counseling. That was the first budgeted amount. You can see what we were allotted in 1920. I only extended that 1 year looking at what we had remaining in the budget for 22-23. On page number 10, which is the second page of our budget, it continues some of the services that I just mentioned, some of the initiatives that we had in place, but it does add in the family engagement payments for the hotspots so that we can continue to engage with our families. And it does also include extending years for the other programs that we had. As you can see, as I total that up, we still have a healthy remaining fund balance. I put a couple other considerations on the bottom that we may want to look at. And obviously, as leadership changes in the district, these may be things that either at the end of this year or the following year that we look at to, again, secure ways that we can continue to work with our students academically, socially, emotionally within the district. So there are some opportunities to add some things and make some adjustments in the budget as we move forward. The last few pages that I included, I did include the notice that we sent out for our school community liaison position, and this was done through the Ashtabula County ESC. And then the last pages after that was the service agreement that is with community counseling, again, to provide those services to our families, and that's any student within the district for some of the needs that I know we're facing now and that we will be facing in the future.
Okay, I have some questions here, and the first question here is whether or not we had our council look at the services agreement, and in particular, I'm concerned about page 3, where community counseling sets forth that they're an independent contractor, but then 2 lines down on paragraph 9, we have an indemnification clause here, where if one of community counseling's employees were to hit our child or abuse one of our children, we're on the hook, for all of those expenses. I think that's contrary to what an independent contractor situation is, and frankly, I don't know why we would indemnify community counseling for harms that they were to cause to our children when we don't have the ability to oversee their work. So I will tell you that I will not approve this contract with that language unless it's been approved by our council, but it's inconsistent internally. And secondly, I can't give a blank check for us to pay for any harm that someone who's not our employee causes. So I'll just say that. Has there been any discussion here or anyone who's reviewed this contract?
It was not reviewed by council, but I can definitely bring those items in on page 3, number 7 and number 9 to their attention to have them take a look.
Okay. Next thing here, and this brings up another situation here. So am I taking it here that the funding for this is part of this funding coming from the last biennium budget where the governor allowed for these wraparound services? That's correct?
Correct.
So that was for the last biennium budget. Do we have any indication about whether or not those will be continued here in this coming 2-year biennium budget or no?
All indications have been that they will continue. But again, there's no guarantee there, but there has been indication that it will continue.
Okay, and then my final question here is what makes me uncomfortable here with this is, I remember back in the olden days, and I'm now the old man here on the school board, but I remember back in the olden days when I went to public schools, we used to have counselors that would actually provide these services. We had to make that choice of, do we get rid of counseling services or do we get rid of teachers? So, we had to make the choices that we made. But this question here about the contract that I ask here, where, we don't have supervisory authority here for these people that we're hiring via contract, but yet we're responsible for any misdeeds that they do. My question here is, do we need to look at rehiring counselors here in the school? Because that way they're our employees, they're our responsibility, we're the ones that oversee their work. So, this contract language concerns me for a multitude of different reasons, but I'm also concerned about whether or not we have anything here with respect to contracts here, with our union employees about whether or not we should be having to bring back persons if there's funds available. And I know this isn't our fault. We didn't create this. Our budgets get cut by the state, and then we're at the mercy of the state enacting biennium budgets where maybe we'll get money for these services and maybe we won't. And so it kind of puts us in a tough situation to say we're going to hire someone when we may find out in the next biennium budget that we have to fire them because we don't have funds here for it. So, I know none of this is of our creation. I'm concerned about the legalities of this.
Well, I will definitely make our legal counsel aware of that and have them take a look at that. One of the reasons that I did put those other considerations as we move forward into next year and following years, and I did add in hiring counselors using our student wellness and success funds. Again, those could come through the district, they could come through an alternate source like through the ESC, and then also looking at health care services that we have, health aides or nurses, again, as that always has been a need, and we've made adjustments as we've looked at our student population. But I did list those as considerations, so that may be something that we look at as soon as this coming year going into next year.
Okay. And let me just say, I have no problem with community council. I know they do good work. I just hate when the lawyers get involved and I see draconian terms that are put in. And this isn't the first time where I've reviewed a contract and I've been like, why are we, indemnifying some other business that don't control their work and they are employees? I hate it when companies insist or place in terms in their contracts that no one with the right mind these contracts would agree upon. So that makes me distrust the relationship before it's even started.
I will update the board once I find any information out from legal.
I may move to table this here. Is there a requirement for us to have to vote on this today?
I will second that. So that's an amend. We're changing the motion to table it.
I'm sorry, are you
Okay. Thank you, Richard.
asking for approval just of the Student Wellness and Success Funds plan, or are you asking for approval of the services agreement that is attached along with that?
I suppose we could approve the plan for student wellness. I just have a concern here about the provision that deals with the service agreement with Community Counseling Center. So, if we want to table that portion of it, that's fine. I don't know whether or not we have to consider this as a whole or if we can take this piece by piece.
I was looking for approval for the plan. I attached the service agreement because that does become an integral part of that initiative. But obviously, if we had approval of the plan, I can get the answers that you need from the service agreement and, again, continue to work with community counseling if we need to make any changes to that service agreement before it's enacted.
I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with approving the plan, but not the contract here with community counseling until we have further, further information. And if that offending provision, paragraph 9, is taken out, I don't mind you signing the contract, but I can't have the board on the hook for something I can't control.
Mr. Kujala, do you want to distinguish the difference between the guidance counselors that you've mentioned, like the elementary guidance counselor, and the type of counselor that is provided through community counseling? We have never had counselors like this community counseling service in our schools or as employees of the district, only what are termed guidance counselors. And I heard that question from Mr. Dana.
Yes, we have community counselors within our school, but again, they're working with their caseload, students that they typically see, and they've been part of their caseload. Again, these are clinical services. These are counselors that are trained to deal with the diagnostic evaluations of students and to make referrals for any additional services, psychological, psychotherapy services that they may need, psychiatric services that they may need. But again, the clinicians that are part of the school would only be making the initial assessments. Then they would be referring them to other sources if there was needs that they saw. Again, with full consent of their parents, they would be then working with them either at the school building, if that was available, and that was the only way that was available to the student, at their current office in Geneva, or they would make other arrangements with the family. But again, these are services, high-end services, that our students have not been able to obtain unless, again, they were a current client of community counseling, and again, they were going through Medicare or Medicaid.
So the additional clinical service and rates, and that's on page 5, those are services that our staff traditionally has never provided. Is that true?
That is correct. Yeah, we would not have a clinician or a staff member that would be dealing with this type of therapy in a school setting. So
Not
again,
in a diagnostic setting here, because I see a nurse practitioner. That was never done in our schools previously.
maybe a few of the diagnostics, but again, not anything beyond that.
So again, I would feel more comfortable. I don't want to get ourselves into a buzzsaw here contractually, so on a couple of different reasons. So
I'll be in contact with legal counsel first thing in the morning.
okay. So I think there's a motion to table this. I think there was a second, so I don't know what the other board members want to do on this.
It
I
seems
have a
like
couple of
they're
questions
wrapped together,
also.
in my opinion. I think that the plan and the agreement are kind of a whole. So I think we do need to table it. That's my opinion.
And Mrs. Metzler, you had a question?
Yeah, I just had a couple of clarifying questions on this, and I don't disagree, just for the record, I don't disagree with Mr. Dana, I'm sorry. I don't disagree with any of that. I'm okay with tabling this until you get some answers. I can go either way with that. But the questions that I had, as it relates to what we were just talking about, the intervention program and counseling, that shows a budget of $50,000, and it shows the $18,000 for like 21-22, $18,000 annual plus services. So is the $50,000 a stopping point? You know, if those services are billed directly to our district for anything that the students incur based on that fee schedule on the last page, is there a cap on that? Or is it just we are going to incur the cost of those services for anybody for however much?
That's why I looked at our budget, and I did put I was trying to determine initially how much I wanted to set aside and budget for that item. If we needed to adjust that budget, this agreement really is only for the remainder of this school year and one more year after that. It would end in June of 2022. The reason I did that is we could then look to see how the services are being used, what extent the services were being used, the cost of the services to the district and then make an adjustment to our budget at that time if we needed to adjust it slightly up or we could reduce it slightly. So again, not knowing that this is a brand new program, this is not being done in any other school and really was set up separately. I worked with community counseling to set up something that I think fit our schools and district. We were just coming up with a number so that at least we had a cap, but they would keep us updated as to how that's being spent and where we sit in our balance as we move forward.
And I just want to say that I appreciate the efforts to get these services out to all of the students in our schools, because that was one of the things that I heard from our teachers in some of our elementary schools, is that there were students in need but didn't qualify through the Medicare, Medicaid, and this is what we need to help those students. So I appreciate your efforts in getting this set up. And my last question is about the Community Liaison SRO officer. So the estimated cost it shows on page 3 is the $42,000 a year. Is that just our district's cost? And is that half of the cost of the SRO, a split with the city, or is that the full cost?
That's our portion of the cost, so that's half the cost. The city picks up the remaining part of that, which consists of the other part of the salary and any benefits that are part of that position.
Thank you.
So, do we need a vote to table?
Well, I think the motion has been changed to table and seconded, overriding the first motion.
Okay, so we need a roll call.
We'll call to table.
We need a roll call vote to table the motion, or table the item number 5.
Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
and Mrs. Ortiz.
Yes.
Now, are we going to table this in its entirety?
Yes.
Okay. Next item, I recommend approval to advertise for the purchase of 2 or more school bus chassis and bodies.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Well, I want to say I appreciate the listing here of the buses that we have, and also the mileage that we have. And, we were, because of budgetary cuts, we didn't make bus purchases for a lengthy period of time. And that shows with respect to the amount of mileage that some of our buses have. And with increased age and increased mileage, you are obviously we're going to have to pay more in maintenance, or we may just have where we don't have buses available here from which to transport students. So we're at where we're at here now, just based on decisions we had to make in the past with cutting the regular rotation of replacing our buses.
My question, Kevin, is if I look at this sheet right, it says we have 28 regular and then one IC. Do we have 29 buses?
That is correct. We have 29 buses currently.
And how many of those 29 buses right now are serviceable and roadworthy?
Well, every bus on that list that is marked as active or inactive have passed the state inspection. The 2 marked on there as OOS are for out of service. Those are the 2 trade-ins. We have been waiting on the buses that were last approved to purchase, and because of COVID, they have been delayed, manufacturing has been delayed. So those still sit. Those were not inspected, and those are out of service. Every other bus, 27 of the 29, are able to be used and have passed inspection.
And how many buses do we deploy each day? Any average school days? How many buses leave the bus lot?
I believe that we either have 20 or 21 buses that are out on various routes.
Okay, thank you.
So generally with the 29 buses, if we're running 21, we would have 8 spares when those 2 new buses come in, and we have those inspected and get rid of the out-of-service buses. So I did pass this out, as Mr. Dana alluded to, so that you can see that we have about 13 buses here that are 13 years old or more. And I say that because when you see that bus year, that usually comes out the year before. So in 2004, we purchased the 2005 buses. In 2009, we were purchasing 2010 buses, although I know here we bought some stock buses as well, so they actually were purchased in 2010. But yes, this is getting to be a little, we almost have half our fleet that is 13 years old or more. So just wanted the board to be able to see, yes, how the age of the buses, the mileage on the buses, and other information to show that, yes, there's definitely still a need to purchase at least 2 buses a year. And as you recall, we did get, or will get, bus assistance on the 2 new buses that are due to arrive at some point through the bus purchase grants available through the state for this year. And we hope that if we can get traction again on the Fair School funding plan, that there is bus money in there for every year. $45 million is being asked for with grants of $45,000 for each bus to get the oldest buses off the road first each year. So we hope that in the future, we have not received any bus purchase assistance from the state since 2009 prior to this year and the grant that's pending. And so we hope that that becomes a reality going forward, that there will be bus purchase assistance each and every year for all the school districts in the state of Ohio.
Well, so the people that don't have this piece of paper in front of them, if I look at this, we have 13 buses that are 10 years or older. That's pretty good if we've been nursing buses for that long. I mean, we have 2 buses we've been nursing since 2005. What's the average that a school district in Northeast Ohio with salt and no money for roads and potholes, does the school keep a bus?
That would be hard to say, because if you recall, there have been times when we have sold our used buses to another school district. So those buses have been 10 to 13 years old. They've had 120,000 to 150,000 miles on it, and another bus is purchasing that to use while we're getting a new bus coming in. Again, during our research for the Fair School funding plan, experts said that after 8 years, the operating costs of maintaining that bus increase greatly. And so they're saying that, buses should be traded in after 8 years. That would be unfathomable. I mean, there's no way that all the districts in Ohio could do that. We used to maintain about every 10 years. We had 30 buses. We purchased 3 buses a year initially, and so we rotated that fleet every 10 years. The mileage is going to range because you have shorter routes in the city, longer routes in the townships, and you have districts in Ohio that are much larger than ours. The largest district serves over 500 square miles. We serve 93, and we're in the top 50% of square mileage, in all the districts in the state. There are a lot of districts that serve 300 or more square miles, so those are going to have a lot of mileage on those buses. So it's hard to pinpoint an average, but when you're getting up to probably 15-year-old buses, that's getting pretty excessive. And if the experts are saying 8, and anything that's 10 or more is getting more costly to maintain and operate.
Thank you.
Can I ask, the buses that are inactive, are those just considered the spare buses if something happens to the active buses? Or what is it that makes them inactive?
That's exactly it. When we file this report with the state, we have to list the buses that are going to be used in regular route service and those buses that are labeled as spares. So spares and inactive are basically the same thing. So those buses are used when a bus breaks down and has to be sent in or brought into the bus garage for repair. That another bus has to be taken out, and that would be one of these spares that are marked inactive. They also might be used on field trips if they're, if the buses are busy on routes, and although we've had, with a shortage of bus drivers, we probably don't have this happen as much, but there were times in the past where we might have a sub run the regular bus route so a regular bus driver could take a field trip, and it would leave, during the time that we're still running routes, and a spare would be used for that field trip. So all of those inactive buses are being used as spares when for that, just as you said, when a bus breaks down or another bus is needed, a bus brought in for routine service, and another bus is needed to run the route.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
I just have one question. Bus number 6 has almost 160,000 miles, and we still have that as an active bus. Did we redo something on it to be able to keep it active with that many miles? Because it looks like that one has the most out of all.
I told Mr. Kujala we might get a question like that, but we really don't have a good answer for you.
Okay.
It's up to our bus mechanic to determine which buses are used in regular route service. So in some cases, even though the higher mileage, that bus might still be in better shape than a lower mileage bus or even a newer bus.
And
But
only
it's-
one other question. Bus 5 I've heard referred to quite a bit because I think that was the one that was messed up, last week or the week before or whatever, but we have that marked as inactive, but we've been using it.
Well, if it was being used, it was probably being used as a spare.
Okay.
If any buses that are in for repair, sometimes in some of those repairs might be lengthy, so it may be multiple days, then they'll pull one of the other spares that we have, the inactive buses, that will become active for that period of time.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, roll call. Mr. Lillie?
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz,
Yes.
and Mr. Arndt.
Yes.
Okay, I recommend the following fund to be appropriated according to the adopted budget. The fund name is,
moved.
Second.
discussion? Roll call, Mr. Lillie?
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz,
Yes.
Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
and Mr. Dana.
Yes.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the following personnel actions.
So
and
moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz,
Yes.
Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
and Ms. Fisher.
Yes. Need a motion for the following volunteer coaches for the school year.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Ortiz,
Yes.
Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
and Mrs. Metzler.
Yes.
Okay, other items.
Yes, I do have a few other items, and I did provide you with some information. The first one that I want to talk briefly about is the third grade fall testing. That has multiple colors on that page, and it has the heading for Geneva Area City Schools AIR, American Institute for Research Assessment Results. Our third grade students did take the fall assessment this year. And as part of that assessment, hang on. You can see that I did add in black, that's in the black print. I did add in the details for the fall assessment, and it shows the scale score for the state of Ohio, the district, and each of the elementary buildings, and then the percent proficient. And I apologize, I'm missing one page that I had marked on. One moment. And I did add in 5 different colors, the black again being the current year, and then you can see all the way down to the purple, which is 2016. Last year, the red color that's on there for 2019, you can see that there was a fall score, but again, as you remember, with the closure of the public schools in Ohio, there was no spring score. So again, you can see how the buildings have done over the last 5 years, from fall to spring. I did want to just give you just a little bit of information. We thought that there would be some drop-off this year based on the closure of the buildings from March through the end of last year. Our second graders at that time did not have the experience of maybe doing some of the practice assessments that they normally do, and some of the normal practice that might go on with just taking that type of assessment. But I was overall fairly pleased with our first administration. You can see that the state of Ohio, the average or the percent proficient was pretty similar to what it normally has been, approximately in the upper 30s to lower 40s is that first administration for all the third grade students in the state of Ohio. You can see district-wide, typically we are in the mid to upper 30s. The 1 year, last year, we ended up having 40%. So you can see that this year at 34% as a district, it was pretty similar to what we've done in the past. Austinburg, again, they've had years, they probably have bounced around the most for the elementary schools. They've gone anywhere from 40% proficient in that first administration to 70% in that first administration over that 5-year period. You can see this year they were at 58%. Cork typically is in the 30s to 40% over the 5 years. You can see where their range of scores have gone for that first administration, and this year they were at 36. So again, pretty similar and in line for what they've had. And Geneva Platter-Spencer, you can see over the 5 years has been in that 20% range for that first administration, all 5 years. And again, this year, in line, but a little bit on the low end from what they're normally used to. Obviously, the administrators and teachers will continue to monitor all of this as we get closer to spring administration. And again, if spring administration happens, hopefully the students will fare much better in that second administration. But we knew that there might be a deficit here. Again, these are students that this is their first time as third graders that they've taken a similar type assessment. Now, we do have some diagnostics that they've taken that are similar, but again, this is the first time that it's at this length for this ELA state test that they do take. So again, we'll continue to monitor that. I just wanted to give you kind of a look at how we've done over a period of time so you can kind of see. And again, overall, I think we were pretty much in line, which was a little bit better than I was thinking, especially with students missing the amount of time that they missed. But again, lots of work to do. lots to prepare our third graders for that second administration that will come in the month of April. Any questions that I can answer for that?
When was that test administered for the fall?
That was in October? October, end of October. And those results had just come back to us, so just prior to the returning here at the first of the year.
I just have one comment. I'm very impressed that we stayed in line with where we normally are with everything that happened. I know the scores aren't terrific or anything, but with everything that our students went through from spring and then summer and everything with COVID, I think that says a lot that we maintained or closely maintained. I know the scores are nothing to jump for joy over, but with everything that they've endured, I think kudos to the students.
I would concur, and again, I think there's a lot of thanks to go out to our students, our parents, because there was much more put on parents and our teaching staff, because remote education was not something that they've been trained to do. They had to jump in with both feet and be ready to do it, and I think obviously there was education taking place because those scores are in line from what we've expected in the past when students have been full-time in school in March through the end of the year and coming back full-time at the beginning of the year. So I think there's some positives when you look at that.
You know, while I agree with that, it's just you look at the state of Ohio for the past, 5 years. I mean, this is an indictment here on what happens when you cut, funding from the state. I mean, to have it where, consistently between 37% or at the highest 44% of students, and this is across the state, that are passing this test at the third grade level. This is an indictment upon what's occurring in Columbus.
Anything else, questions for that information?
Okay,
Did you have something?
no.
Oh, I had a
You
couple
have
other
others?
items. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
sorry.
The other items that I gave you, we've talked a lot about enrollment, and I wanted to share a little bit of information about the differences that we've seen, especially from last year to this year. Now, they're not direct comparisons because the top, the 2019-20, is the district enrollment from September of 2020, and the bottom is the district enrollment from January this month, 1/6/2021. In the very bottom, I did list in red ink the differences if you look from 2019-20 school year to 2020-21 school year, if you saw any decreases in those grades or if you saw increases in any of those grade levels, and also on the right side when you look at individual schools. So you can see that we did have decreases in enrollment. Again, some of those students have left the district, some have gone to alternate sources for education. We had increases in our homeschool numbers. Much of that due to some of the things that were happening within the state of public schools, the pandemic, COVID, and some of the other precautionary things that had to be put in place. On the back, I did want to give you a little bit of information about what our current enrollment looks like and our potential enrollment for the second semester. So you can see what our 4-day current looks like in each of the building, what our online-only students look like, students that have indicated that they will be returning for the second semester. In our original plan, we had our online students staying out for either the first 9-week period or the second 9-week period, looking at a return at that time of January 25th. We do have some families that have elected to stay out and online as we move forward. You can see that we still have 433 students within the district, the majority of those being at the middle school and high school. So I gave you those numbers just again so you can kind of see where we stand. Online remote education is here. I think there are some families, even though we have had some struggles where students have not succeeded well with the online. We've had to send some letters and reminders and make personal phone calls and things to make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to. But I think there are some students, there are some families that have a comfort level with online and have succeeded. So again, as I mentioned earlier, it's something that we're going to have to look very closely at as we move forward and what we're going to be offering from Geneva Area City Schools so that we keep those students here as part of our enrollment and don't lose some of those students. So that'll be something that we continue to talk about at future board meetings, and I know with the administrators we'll be meeting here in the beginning of February to discuss and look at some plans and what teaching assignments may look like as we move forward for next year.
Eric, how did we've now been open up back 4 days a week for the past week and a half. How's that gone? Can you give us a report on that?
I think overall, from the reports that I'm receiving, the 4-day return to in-person has gone very well. Again, students and teachers and staff were all very excited to be back in person. We had to accommodate a little bit, especially at the high school level for the testing midterms that take place, so they had to come up with alternative methods of how those would be administered. I think most of the teachers did a great job of coming up with some new way, some open notes, some cards, some verbal or ways that they could, especially in the foreign languages, where they would actually do one-on-one type sessions where the student would repeat certain phrases or things that they learned within the class for that assessment. So they came up with new ways to really test students. But overall, it's been good. I think again, everybody's been excited to be back, and we really have we haven't had cases of quarantine, very limited cases, a few cases that have happened within the sports, the athletic activities, and some of that has been because of our participation with other schools where maybe there was a positive case, and then we've had to quarantine a few athletes due to that. But other than that, very positive.
I have a couple questions on the online enrollment numbers. So are these numbers current as of after the Christmas break of the amount of students that are online?
These are, yes, current from after the Christmas break. And as we've been notifying students, finding out if they are returning as of January 25th, or they've already returned. We didn't have many schools had a strict deadline date that if you didn't come back at that time, you were out for another period of time, 9 weeks or the rest of the year. We've allowed a little bit of flow between families and students that wanted to come back and return earlier because they finally felt comfortable with in person. But these are the numbers as of right now that we know either are back in the building or are coming back as of the 25th.
And so the other part of that question is, and maybe it doesn't matter, but you talk about the students that are planning to come off of online and back into the school, returning the beginning of the second semester. But is there a way for us to have any indication if any of the students that are currently in school would be going to online at the beginning of that semester? Or are we not expecting that to be the case?
We lost a few students, I know, that have decided to go online that maybe were in person, but I think those numbers have been minimal. I can find that information out for you, but again, there's been less that have left in person to go online. The ones that have stayed online obviously had a reason of why they wanted to be online. They found it successful. They've been successful on the online instruction, so they've wanted to remain online, and we've allowed that.
Are you done, Amber?
Yes, I am.
Okay. My question is, what's the difference between online only and staying online?
Those are our online that we had previous to saying, starting to contact them to say, are you returning as of the second semester? Are you staying online going forward in the third 9 weeks? So we did lose some students, such as looking at GPS. 74 were online, 7 have said they're returning at the second semester, so we're gonna have 67 that are gonna continue online moving forward for the third 9 weeks.
Okay.
You have
Any other questions or comments?
Well, so your last report had shown that the high school was different than the other 4 buildings and that they had more kids that were going to go from in-person to online. This is showing something different. So that all changed since that last report, so that now there are more people at the high school returning to in-person than going the other way?
And is Mr. Weatherholt still here? And they're going to have about 200 that are staying out, actually 206 that are going to still be online. But you can see that we are having some that are returning. And again, the majority that have been online chose that for a number of reasons. Many of them were safety reasons and the different precautions that we had in place. Obviously, some of that has maybe lessened in some of their minds, and also they believe that coming back in person, at least for the second semester, would be beneficial to their child. Anything else for that? My last one's really brief, I promise. The last document that I gave you, we did talk a little bit about this last time, and this was the staff vaccination survey. You see a lot of information in the news. This was something the Ashtabula County Health Department sent out to us. I just wanted to provide the data to you of what was returned by our staff. Right now, we are tentatively scheduled for Wednesday, February 10th to administer vaccines to our teachers, our staff, our administration here on site at Geneva. We will be meeting with the health department tomorrow to get a little bit of information, but you can see the overall results. You can look at each of the buildings, but the overall results, we have 267 staff members, and there's some additional staff members that we have from other services, and 142 have said that they are wanting to be vaccinated at that time, so about 53.1%. So there are still people that are considering. We'll continue to gather numbers if there's people that change their mind, but we had to give initial numbers to the health department so that they can prepare those vaccines, and the hope is that we'll have those vaccines available on our scheduled date. So,
Have they guaranteed you this many, the 142, all on February 10th?
well, I'll know a little bit more tomorrow when I do meet with them, but right now they are guaranteeing that they should be able to supply that amount on those days. Again, they do those in groups of 10. So if you don't have, at that 142, we'd be able to vaccinate 140. Those other 2 would either have to go to another site, unless we can also get 8 others that would come that day to get vaccinated. So we may have some additional staff members that may decide, but right now they said they would be able to accommodate that. But vaccines have not been as plentiful in the county as I think was originally hoped.
Okay, Mr. Arndt?
Thank you. You know, we've all heard good and bad about this online hybrid, whatever you want to call it, but I've had a couple of people reach out to me about an exceptional job that one of our teachers has done, and I felt it necessary to mention him. Mr. Sorber. I had parents tell me that the children could not wait to sign on to attend his online class. They were excited about their time with them. He was able to develop some sort of interactive thing with all the students that were locked on at one time. He understood if there was going to be an issue about an assignment or something wasn't working right, and he was able to talk to students through it. So it was just a smooth process, and it was an easy process for both the student and the parents noticed the difference, especially the parents that had several children. They noticed how easy it was with Mr. Sorber and how excited the children were to log on with him. And it wasn't necessarily the same with some of the other of their children that were logging on. So I need to give an attaboy to Mr. Sorber. Thank you for what you do and continue to do it.
Anyone else?
Yes, I have a question. I would like to know, back in one of the reports, I think in the Pride Positives, Mr. Kujala, you mentioned that the elementary schools are one-on-one with the Chromebooks. When do we expect the middle school and the high school to have those distributed?
Yeah, middle school is done. They've been one-to-one probably for the whole school year because we didn't take any books from them. And high school has your full allocation? Yeah. There was some discussion when those Chromebooks did come, and obviously coming back to in-person helped. We have most of those, if a student wanted to take the Chromebook with them, have that availability, but we were trying to keep them within the school building since it was a resource that we're using also here at school. We haven't set up a clear procedure for what will happen when we had some breakage or damage to the Chromebooks. Right now, if there is a broken screen or something and we find that the student or family is responsible, we build back to those families for that. It hasn't been, there's been a few, but it hasn't been a tremendous amount. We did also order some additional carts so that we would have places that those could be stored and charged here at school when they are here. Luckily, we were able to get them through another district, and we purchased 60 carts.
60 carts from Medina City Schools, and Jared picked up 5 free carts from Columbus Grove. So we will have 65 carts by the end of the month.
At an amazingly low price, as Mr. Lillie was-
$25 a cart.
$25 a cart. So we were able to get carts, and from what it sounds like, they're in good condition and would provide the necessary resource to, again, have those stored or have them charged during the day. But we're continuing to talk through how one-to-one looks in our district, but again, those are available to students. But again, that transfer, depending on what the student's doing, if they're transferring back and forth because there happened to be an in-person student, that may not be real viable unless there's direct assignments that they're gonna have to be working on. If they're an online student, they already had their device with them and it's available to them.
Okay, so I didn't hear what Mr. Weatherholt said. I couldn't hear him, but I guess the outstanding question is if there is a student that is in person that is in need of a Chromebook because there's a circumstance at home where they don't always have access, because of other needs in the home, are they able to get that Chromebook to use?
Yes, he answered yes.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, and one last thing. I wanted to say as well, kudos to the theater department and Mrs. Christopher. I watched the virtual whodunit. I loved it. I thought it was a great idea. It was very engaging for the community and the school to be able to watch something online. I know there's a lot going on online, but I think it was still a good idea to be able to get the other students involved with what the theater students have been working on. I thought it was great. I thought she did a great job as well as the actors, and I just wanted to mention that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else? Okay, we're now down to the hearing of the public. If there's anyone that would like to make a comment, now is the time. Okay, I recommend the board hold an executive session to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official. We will not be coming back into session. There will be no action taken tonight.
So
Thank you
moved.
very much.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
Mr. Dana,
Yes.
Yes.
and Mrs. Ortiz.
Yes.